Rewriting equations, practice number 3. If x equals 3m minus 4 and y equals 6 minus m, which of the following expresses y in terms of x? So this says I want an equation where it's y equals, and on the opposite side, I want only the variable x. There can be numbers, but no other variable. So I'm going to start with the second equation. And although it has y equals, there's an m over here and there is not an x. So if I go to the first equation, I want to find a way to remove the m and replace it with an expression that has x. So in this first equation, I'm going to solve for m. So to get m by itself and isolate it, remove the number that's not touching the m. To remove a subtracting 4, the inverse operation of subtracting is adding. So I added 4 over here. So x plus 4 equals 3m. Now divide by 3. Inverse operation of multiplying is dividing. When you divide, the 3's cancel, really turning into 1's. And now I have x over 3, because the 3 has to be shared between the two of them, plus 4/3. This is what m equals. So where I see an m, I get to take this expression and substitute it in. So y equals 6 subtract, not subtract m, subtract this quantity. I'm going to distribute the subtraction sign to both items inside, and it will change the sign. So if it was positive, it becomes negative. And now combining like terms, there are 3 different terms here, and only these 2 terms can be combined because they do not contain an x. And I'm going to use a calculator to help do the hard work here. So I have a positive 6, subtract 4/3, turn it back into a fraction by hitting math, fraction is highlighted, and pressing enter twice. So 14/3. And it was, if you notice, a positive 14/3. Okay, now looking at our options, I have a positive 14 and a negative x all over 3, and that's this option. These two are equivalent, because if I put this back into one fraction, because I have a common denominator on the bottom, a negative x on top, and a positive 14, although they're in a different order, it's still a positive 14 and a negative x all over 3. Correct option is E. Please flip to the back. You have 1 minute to complete the problem in the back. And stop. Going over independent practice number 2. If x equals this quantity and y equals this quantity, which of the following expresses y in terms of x? So again, we have a y equals, we want that, but on this side, I can have numbers, but I only want the variable x. And right now I have an m. So I'm going to take the first equation and I'm going to solve for m. To isolate the m, decide which number is not touching the m, and that's what you're going to get rid of first. Opposite of adding 6, the inverse operation of adding is subtracting. And the inverse operation of multiplying is dividing. All right, and this time I'm actually going to keep this together and see if that helps to easily identify the answer. So I could separate them like I did in example 1, or let's see if it's easier if I actually keep the 2 underneath both quantities. So here's what m is equal to. Going up to the first equation, I can take out the m and replace it with this quantity. So y equals 7/2 plus, and I can see already it's going to be easier if I separate this. So going back to separating it how I did in the first problem, this 2 has to be shared with both the x and the 6. So I'm going to write the 2 underneath the x and the 2 underneath the 6. Make sure to carry the negative sign down. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And now I have 3 terms. I'm going to combine like terms. These 2 terms do not contain an x, so I'm going to use the calculator to combine them. Make sure to use parentheses. 7 divided by 2, subtract 3. 7 divided by 2, subtract 3. I'm going to turn it back into a fraction by hitting the button that says math. Fraction is highlighted. Press enter twice. It turns it into 1/2. These 2 quantities combine and equal 1/2. All right, now let's look at our options. Do we see any 1/2 plus x over 2? Not exactly, but notice again, I have the same common denominator. So I can push these quantities back together, leaving 2 on the bottom, not 4. Don't go 2 plus 2 is 4. Leave the common denominator, and on top we have 1 plus x. Correct option is C. The order does not matter, so 1 plus x is the same as x plus 1.